Smoke still hung in the air after the fight. Trees were broken, the ground torn apart by fire and fear. The soldiers moved slowly through the ruins, checking for survivors, but none expected to find life among the silence. Then, near the edge of the forest, something small moved. A weak sound came from the shadows, a soft growl mixed with pain. When they looked closer, they saw it. It was a cub. Not human. Its fur was dark silver, its body trembling as it tried to stand. It looked barely alive, a young predator left behind after the clash. The sight froze everyone. The soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons, whispering warnings. They knew what these creatures could do when grown, how fast and deadly they were. One soldier stepped forward, muttering that it would be better to leave it. "It's dangerous," someone said. "If its kind comes back, we'll all be dead." But one person didn't move away. The medic knelt beside the small creature, her face calm but eyes full of thought. To her, it didn't look dangerous. It looked scared, wounded, lost. The cub tried to snarl, a weak sound that barely rose above a whisper. Its paw was twisted at an odd angle, blood drying across its side. She could tell it had been running, probably trying to escape the chaos. The others called for her to stop, to step back, but she didn't listen. She slowly removed her gloves and reached for her small medical pack. "It's just a baby," she said quietly. The cub flinched when her hand came close, its golden eyes sharp with fear. It didn't understand her words, but it understood her tone. She wasn't there to hurt it. The medic moved slowly, keeping her voice gentle as she spoke to it like she would to a frightened child. The cub's breathing was uneven, its chest rising and falling in quick, shallow movements. Every muscle in its body screamed to run, but it was too weak. The medic opened a small water bottle and set it near its mouth. The cub sniffed it, then turned its head away. The other soldiers grew restless. "We can't waste time," one said. "It's not our problem," she didn't reply. Her eyes stayed fixed on the little creature lying helpless before her. There was something about it, something that made walking away impossible. Finally, she tore a strip from her own sleeve and gently cleaned the wound. The cub jerked once but didn't attack. For a brief moment, their eyes met, human and predator, and something silent passed between them. Not understanding, not trust, but something close to it. As the night grew colder, the soldiers built a fire and moved on, leaving her to finish her work. She stayed, wrapping the cub's leg and whispering softly to calm it. In that quiet moment, under the broken trees, one small act of kindness began a story that neither species would ever forget. The next morning, the camp was quiet, except for the faint crackle of the fire and the soft rustle of the forest beyond. The medic sat a few feet away from the small creature, watching it with patient eyes. The cub's wounds had stopped bleeding, but its body still shook with weakness. Every time she moved even slightly, it flinched. Its golden eyes were wide open, full of something more than pain, something older and deeper. Fear. It didn't trust her. Every time she tried to get close, its lips curled back, showing small, sharp teeth. It wasn't strong enough to fight, yet it still tried. The growls were low, broken, but filled with warning. The medic didn't back away this time. She stayed still, her hands resting on her knees, letting the cub see that she wasn't a threat. The other soldiers kept their distance. They stood near the edge of the clearing, whispering among themselves. Some laughed quietly, shaking their heads. "It's hopeless," one muttered. "Predators don't trust humans. It'll bite her the second she gets close." Others simply turned away, believing it was a waste of time. But the medic didn't seem to hear them. Her eyes stayed on the cub, watching its every breath, every twitch of its ear. She could feel its fear as clearly as her own heartbeat. She knew what it was like to be cornered, unsure of who to trust. So she did the only thing she could, wait. Minutes turned into hours. The sun rose higher, its light cutting through the smoke still hanging in the air from the battle days before. The cub hadn't moved much. Every sound made it jump, a snapping twig, a human voice, the wind shifting the leaves. Its whole world had changed overnight. The creatures it had been taught to fear were now the only ones nearby. At one point, the medic placed a small bowl of water near the cub and stepped back. It glared at her, refusing to move. But when she walked away a few steps, it finally crawled forward and drank, fast and nervous. She smiled quietly, not saying a word. It wasn't trust yet, but it was a beginning. Later that night, when the fire dimmed and most of the camp slept, the medic stayed awake. The cub lay curled up under a blanket she had placed nearby, though it hadn't let her cover it. Its eyes still opened at every sound, but its breathing had slowed. She whispered softly, not expecting it to understand. "You're safe now," she said, her voice almost lost in the wind. The cub blinked, tired and wary, but didn't growl this time. That small silence meant more to her than any words. In that fragile peace, surrounded by soldiers who doubted and a creature that feared her, the medic kept watch. Somewhere deep inside, she hoped that time and kindness could teach even a predator that not all humans were enemies. Days passed slowly in the small camp near the forest's edge. The medic spent most of her time beside the injured cub, trying everything she could to help it heal. Every morning, she cleaned its wounds and changed the bandages, even though it growled softly each time she came near. She brought water in a small metal bowl and set it beside the creature, always waiting for it to move first. Sometimes it drank. Sometimes it only stared at her with wary golden eyes that never softened. The cub's body was getting weaker. Its leg had begun to heal, but the infection inside it worried her. She knew what needed to be done, antibiotic serum from her medical kit, but every time she tried, the cub refused. When she brought the small vial close, it turned its head away or snapped weakly at her hand. Its instincts screamed danger. It didn't understand that she was trying to save it. To the cub, the strange smell of medicine and the metal of human tools meant only pain. She never forced it. Instead, she tried patience. Each time, she sat quietly, speaking in a low voice. "It's to help you," she would whisper. "I won't hurt you." Her words meant nothing to its ears, but her tone, gentle, steady, human, began to carve tiny cracks in the wall of fear between them. Still, the cub's instincts fought back harder. Every kindness made it more confused. The other soldiers grew restless. They didn't understand why she spent so much time on something that might never survive, or worse, might attack her once it recovered. "It's an animal," one said. "It's not like us." She didn't answer. Maybe it wasn't like them, but that didn't mean it didn't deserve care. At night, when the camp went quiet, she sat beside the cub's sleeping form, her back against a tree, exhaustion heavy in her bones. The small creature would twitch and whimper in its sleep, trapped in some silent nightmare. Once, she reached out and placed her hand gently near it, not touching, just close enough for warmth. The cub didn't wake, but its breathing slowed, as if it sensed safety for the first time. The struggle went on for days. Some mornings, the cub refused food. Other times, it ate quietly while keeping one eye open, never fully relaxed. Every small step forward came with another setback. Still, the medic never gave up. To her, the fight wasn't only about saving the cub's life, it was about proving something deeper. She wanted to show that care didn't need a shared language, that trust could grow even in the most unlikely places. She didn't know if the cub would ever understand her actions. But each day she stayed, each quiet word she spoke, and each wound she treated was her way of telling it one simple truth. Not all humans bring harm, some come to heal. The days had begun to blend together, and the air in the camp felt heavier with each passing sunrise. The cub was no longer growling or snapping when the medic came close. It didn't even have the strength to lift its head anymore. Its breathing had turned shallow, uneven, like each inhale was a small battle it might lose. The bright glow that once burned in its golden eyes had faded to a dull, tired light. The medic watched helplessly, feeling the quiet panic building inside her. She had seen soldiers in worse shape, men who survived wounds that should have killed them. But this was different. The cub was too young, too fragile, and its body was losing the fight. The infection had spread faster than she expected. The wounds looked clean from the outside, but deep inside, something deadly was growing. She opened her medical kit again, her hands trembling slightly. The small vial of antibiotics glimmered faintly in the dim light. It was human-made, designed for their own biology, but she knew it could work on the cub. It had to. She had studied the compounds, measured the dose carefully. If the cub would just take it, there was still a chance. But it wouldn't. Every time she tried to bring the medicine close, the cub turned its head, weakly pushing it away with a trembling paw. It didn't growl anymore, but the fear in its eyes was stronger than ever. Even dying, it still didn't trust her. The soldiers had stopped coming near. Most of them believed the creature wouldn't survive the night. "You've done enough," one of them told her softly. "You can't save everything." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Walking away wasn't something her heart knew how to do. She sat beside the cub for a long time, her mind racing. There was no time left to wait for trust to grow naturally. The cub's breathing slowed, each exhale weaker than the last. Her chest tightened as she watched it struggle, its body trembling under the thin blanket she had laid across it. In that quiet moment, a question echoed in her mind. How do you make something born to hate you believe that you mean no harm? She looked at the vial in her hand, then back at the small creature that had fought so hard to stay alive. It had every reason to fear her kind, every reason not to trust, but she couldn't let that be the end of its story. The night grew colder, and her decision grew clear. She wasn't sure if what she was about to do would work, or if it would cost her more than she could afford. But she knew one thing: if she wanted to prove her intent, words weren't enough. It was time to show the cub, in the only way it would understand, that she meant no harm. The night was colder than usual, the kind that seemed to freeze the air between each breath. The campfire burned low, throwing long shadows across the ground. The medic sat near it, her knees pulled close, the small glass vial resting in her hand. The liquid inside caught the firelight, glowing softly like something alive. She turned it slowly between her fingers, her thoughts silent but heavy. Behind her, the voices of the soldiers drifted through the darkness. They spoke quietly, thinking she couldn't hear. "It's pointless," one said. "That thing's not going to make it." Another added, "You can't fight nature." "Let it go." Their words carried no anger, just tiredness. Everyone had seen enough death to stop believing in miracles, but she didn't respond. She only stared at the fire and then at the cub lying a few steps away. It was sleeping restlessly, its small body twitching with pain. Every few moments it whimpered softly, its breathing uneven. The sound twisted something inside her. She could tell it was slipping away, caught between fear and exhaustion. The medic looked down at the vial again. She had already measured the dose perfectly. The only thing left was to make the cub drink it. That simple task had turned into an impossible one. She thought of all the times she'd tried to help it. The hours spent talking softly, the water bowls left untouched, the medicine refused over and over again. She could still remember the way its eyes had looked at her, not with hate anymore, but with a deep, tired fear. The wind picked up, brushing against the fire and making the flames dance. The shadows around her flickered like ghosts. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing harder against her chest. If she did nothing, the cub would die before sunrise. If she acted, it might still die, but at least she'd know she tried everything she could. She glanced once more toward the soldiers. Most had turned in for the night. The few still awake avoided looking her way. They'd already decided it wasn't worth the risk. But she wasn't like them. For her, saving a life, any life, wasn't about worth. It was about doing what was right, even when no one understood. Quietly she stood. The sound of her boots on the dirt was soft, almost lost in the wind. She crossed the short distance to where the cub lay, its breathing shallow, its fur damp from sweat. She knelt beside it and took a deep breath. The medicine gleamed in her hand as she whispered, "You're not alone." Her voice was steady, though her heart was racing. The cub stirred but didn't open its eyes. She hesitated for only a second longer, then lifted the vial to her lips. The camp stayed silent, the stars above cold and bright, as one human made a choice that would change everything. The night had fallen completely silent. Only the crackle of the dying fire and the faint sound of the cub's shallow breathing filled the air. The medic sat beside it, the small vial glowing faintly in her hand. She could feel her pulse in her fingers, every beat reminding her how much this single moment mattered. There was no one left to ask for advice, no time to wait for another solution. The cub's breaths were growing weaker, its life fading with every minute. She looked down at the tiny creature curled in the blanket. Its eyes flickered open, catching the dim light, and for a second, They locked with hers. Even now, even in its weakness, fear still lived inside those golden eyes. It didn't understand what she was trying to do. All it saw was a human, and its kind had taught it what that meant. She took a deep breath, steadying her hands. Then, without breaking eye contact, she raised the vial to her lips. The liquid shimmered slightly as it caught the firelight. It wasn't meant for humans. Strong, bitter medicine made for a body much tougher than hers. She hesitated only for a second before tilting it and taking a sip. The taste hit her instantly, sharp, metallic, and burning. Her throat tightened and she swallowed hard, forcing it down. For a moment, she could feel her heartbeat race, her body reacting to the foreign compound. The cub's ears twitched, its gaze fixed on her, confused by what it saw. She held the vial in front of her, showing it wasn't poison, showing it didn't bring death. Nothing happened. She didn't fall, didn't scream. She simply breathed slow and calm, her face soft but determined. Then she lowered the vial and held it out toward the cub. The cub didn't move at first. It watched her closely, its small chest rising and falling fast. The strange human scent mixed with the medicine made it hesitate. For a long, quiet moment, it just stared. The medic waited patiently, her arm steady though her heart still raced. Finally, the cub sniffed the air, taking in the scent that no longer seemed dangerous. Its nose brushed against the edge of the vial. Then slowly, carefully, it touched its tongue to the rim. Just once, the medic didn't move. A few seconds later, the cub licked it again, longer this time, taking in a small sip. A soft sigh escaped her lips, half relief, half exhaustion. The fear in the cub's eyes began to fade, replaced by something quieter, something uncertain but real. It didn't understand why the human had done it, but in that small act, something changed. The fire crackled softly behind them, throwing a warm light across the ground. The medic stayed beside the cub, still and calm as the night carried on, two lives sharing the same fragile moment of trust. The fire had burned down to faint orange embers, and the world around them felt still. The medic sat close to the cub, her eyes heavy but unwilling to close. Her body ached in a way she hadn't expected. The medicine she had drunk wasn't meant for humans, and she could feel it running through her veins like a slow, burning current. Her stomach churned, her throat felt dry, but she didn't move away. She stayed right there, keeping her focus on the small creature sleeping beside her. Hours slipped by without a sound. The camp was quiet. Even the soldiers had stopped checking on her. Somewhere far off, an owl called, and the wind brushed softly through the leaves. The cub's breathing was uneven at first, sharp and shallow, but slowly, over time, it began to calm. Each breath grew steadier, deeper, and less strained. The infection was still there, but something was changing. The medic leaned back slightly, her hand pressed over her stomach as she took slow breaths. Her head felt light and her heart pounded in her chest. The effects of the medicine were strong, but she didn't regret what she had done. Every time the cub's chest rose, it gave her strength to stay awake a little longer. She watched the firelight dance over its fur, the silver strands glinting softly in the darkness. For the first time since finding it, the cub didn't look like a threat or a symbol of fear. It looked fragile, alive but uncertain, caught between the instinct to survive and the faint memory of pain. The medic couldn't help but wonder what kind of world had taught a young creature to be so afraid of kindness. Sometime before dawn, her body finally gave in to exhaustion. She didn't fall asleep completely, just drifted between moments of rest and awareness. Every sound around her pulled her back to reality. She checked the cub's breathing again and again, afraid it might stop if she looked away for too long. Then, as the first hint of sunlight broke through the trees, something small shifted. The cub moved. Its paw twitched, then stretched weakly. The medic leaned forward instantly, her tiredness forgotten. The cub blinked open its golden eyes, dazed but awake. Its gaze met hers for a long, quiet moment. She expected it to flinch, to pull away like always, but it didn't. Its eyes didn't hold fear this time, only confusion and a faint sense of calm. Slowly, she reached out her hand. The cub tensed for a second, but didn't retreat. Her fingers brushed lightly against its fur, and it stayed still, warm, alive. A faint smile touched her lips. The night had been long and the pain had been real, but in that silent morning light, something had changed forever. Trust, once impossible, had finally begun to take root between two beings who were never meant to understand each other. The morning light filtered softly through the trees, painting the camp in shades of gold and quiet peace. The medic sat close to the cub, her body aching from the long night, but her heart lighter than it had been in days. The small creature was awake now, its breathing steady and calm. It looked at her with tired eyes, no longer full of hate or fear, just silent curiosity. She moved slowly, giving it time to see her hands before she reached forward. Bits of dirt and dried blood still clung to its fur from the night of the battle. Carefully, she brushed the dirt away with gentle fingers. The cub's muscles tensed at first, a reflex from too many days of pain and mistrust. But when it realized her touch wasn't meant to harm, it stayed still. For the first time, it didn't pull away. That tiny moment, barely a breath, felt like a miracle. The medic paused, her hand hovering above its fur, afraid to move too fast and break the fragile calm between them. Then she continued, running her fingers softly through the matted hair. The cub's eyes flickered, its body trembling once more, but not from fear this time. It was something else, something it didn't understand. She smiled faintly, whispering, "It's all right. You're safe now." Her voice was soft, the kind of voice one uses with something fragile. The cub blinked, tilting its head slightly as if trying to make sense of the strange warmth it felt. When she brought the medicine close again, it didn't resist. The small vial no longer seemed like a threat. She held it out, letting the scent drift in the air. The cub sniffed it, hesitated for a heartbeat, and then began to drink. The medic felt her chest loosen with relief. After all the days of struggle, fear, and exhaustion, this was the first real victory. From that moment, something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't full trust yet, but it was enough. The cub no longer growled when she approached. It no longer watched her every move as if waiting for betrayal. Instead, it stayed close, its eyes following her not out of fear, but out of recognition. Later, as she checked its bandages and cleaned the last of the wounds, she whispered, "Karu." The word came naturally, soft and steady. It means heart. She didn't know why she said it. Maybe because this small creature, born from the other side of war, had somehow reminded her what compassion meant. The cub blinked at the sound, ears twitching slightly. She smiled, repeating the name again, quieter this time. "Karu." The forest around them seemed to pause, the sunlight wrapping both of them in a soft glow. It was a simple moment, a human touching a creature that had once feared her. But in that gentle silence, something larger began to grow. Not just healing, not just survival, but trust born from kindness and patience. For the first time, both of them began to believe that peace was possible. The forest had grown peaceful again. Weeks had passed since the night the medic took that first sip, and the cub, Karu, had changed more than anyone could have imagined. Its wounds had healed, and though it still limped slightly, the strength in its movements had returned. It followed the medic everywhere now, staying close, always alert but calm. What began as fear had turned into quiet loyalty. The soldiers had learned to live with its presence, though many still watched from a distance. Some were uneasy, others simply curious. It was hard for them to understand how the creature that once snarled at every human touch now rested beside one. But the medic didn't try to explain it. She didn't need to. The bond between them spoke louder than words. One evening, as the sun began to sink behind the trees, the air shifted. The forest grew still, too still. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Karu lifted its head suddenly, ears twitching, eyes fixed on the tree line. A low sound escaped its throat, a sound the medic had never heard before. It wasn't fear, but recognition. Then, from the shadows, figures began to appear. Large, sleek shapes moving silently through the fading light. The predator pack had returned. The sight sent ripples of panic through the camp. Soldiers scrambled for weapons, their voices sharp with alarm. "They're here," one shouted. "Get ready!" The medic rose slowly, holding up a hand. "Don't," she said quietly. Stay where you are." Her heart was pounding, but she didn't move back. She looked down at Karoo, who was standing now, its body tense but not afraid. It limped forward a few steps, making a low, melodic sound that echoed softly through the clearing. It wasn't a growl, it was something older, a call that carried meaning only its kind would understand. From the shadows, the largest of the predators stepped forward, the Alpha. Its fur shimmered like polished stone, and its eyes burned with intelligence. The soldiers froze, their fingers trembling near their triggers, but the medic didn't move. She stood quietly, her hands open and empty. The Alpha stopped a few feet away from her. The air between them felt heavy, charged with something deep. It lowered its massive head slightly, sniffing the air. The medic didn't flinch. She stood her ground, her breath steady but her heart racing. Karoo made another sound, softer this time, and the Alpha's gaze shifted toward it. For a long moment, the world seemed to hold still. Then the Alpha stepped closer and sniffed near the medic's shoulder. It gave a low rumble, not a warning, but something that felt almost like acknowledgement. Then it turned back toward the trees. The rest of the pack followed, moving silently into the forest's embrace. Karoo looked at the medic one last time, then at its kind disappearing into the shadows. The humans watched in stunned silence as the predators vanished peacefully. For the first time, the medic realized what had truly been built between them. It wasn't just trust between one cub and one human. It was understanding between two worlds that were never meant to meet. Years passed, and the war that once divided humans and predators finally ended. The world slowly began to heal, just like that young cub once had. But even as soldiers returned home and outposts fell silent, one story continued to echo through both worlds. The story of the medic who drank the cure meant for a creature that should have been her enemy. No one had ordered her to do it. There had been no witnesses expecting heroism, no reward promised. It was a simple act of trust, made in silence, in the middle of fear and doubt. Yet that single moment changed everything. Soldiers told the story around campfires long after peace was declared, their voices soft with awe. She drank it first, they'd say, so the cub would believe her. And every listener felt a quiet respect for a courage that didn't come from power, but from empathy. As years went by, the story spread beyond the soldiers. It reached leaders, diplomats, and scholars. In time, it was written into the first treaty between humans and the predator clans. They called it the Pact of the First Sip. The words were simple but powerful, a reminder that peace doesn't begin with armies or signatures. It begins when someone dares to trust. The medic never sought fame. She returned to her life quietly, tending to the wounded, rebuilding villages, and teaching others that understanding could save more lives than any weapon. But sometimes, she would wake before dawn and look toward the forests that bordered the settlements. She always half expected to see a familiar shape moving between the trees. And one day she did. A large shadow emerged from the mist, walking with slow, steady steps. It was Karoo, fully grown now, its coat shining under the pale morning light. The scar on its shoulder was still there, faint but visible, a reminder of how far they had both come. The guards tensed when they saw it, but she raised her hand calmly. Karoo stopped a few feet away, its golden eyes watching her with recognition. Then, with a low rumble that sounded almost like a greeting, it sat down. From that day on, Karoo was often seen near human settlements. It never attacked, never showed aggression. It would patrol the forests, sometimes walking alongside workers or standing watch during the night. People came to call it a guardian spirit, a living symbol of what could happen when fear gave way to trust. The children loved to hear the story. They would ask, "Is it true? Did she really drink the medicine first?" And their parents would smile, telling them, "Yes, that's how peace began." Generations later, statues were built, one of a human kneeling with a vial in her hand, and beside her, a predator cub resting its head near her knee. The plaque beneath read only one line: "She drank first, so others could live without fear." And in both worlds, human and predator alike, her legacy of trust lived on.